Welcome back, everyone. This is a panel on media, new technology, and artificial intelligence. So I know, Alex, you wanted to go first. I'll introduce you, and did you have a PowerPoint or something? Okay. So Alexander Brutelle is a partnership specialist and senior reporter at The Examination, a newsroom investigating health threats and empowering communities. He is also co-founder of EIF, Environmental Investigative Forum, a global network of environmental investigative journalists who co-initiated Burning Skies, a collaborative investigation on gas flaring in the MENA region and the African continent by Western oil and gas majors.
Thank you. Let me just plug in my laptop. Sorry about that. So, AI is going to kill us all. No, I'm joking. I want to start with a joke because I'm going to tell you about some really positive elements about how you can use actually not so much newer technology, but old technologies to create new reporting methods using geodata and remote sensing tools to develop cross-regional collaborations where regional partners from Africa, the EU, the US, and Latin America can cooperate on some international stories. I'm calling them old technologies, but we're not using fax machines to do these investigations. I'm calling them old because using geodata is not so new. Like the academics have been doing that for years. But it's a bit more recent to see that being used for investigations and for journalism investigation. And this goes about the same way for remote sensing tools. At EIF, I explained yesterday, we do cross-regional investigations, and we look for topics that can be systemic and relevant to several regions at the same time. And for environmental reporting, using this, I was giving the example yesterday of Perenco, using a systemic method where you investigate a global corporation. That is a really good way to trigger such collaborations. And now we're going to take things from the angle of a tool. How can a data set itself, not really taking a company in particular, but taking a specific set of data, geodata, can trigger such collaborations? So just a few definitions, geodata and GIS. So GIS, Geoinformation System, is going to be the kind of tools that is being used to process this data. I have GPS coordinates that are associated with a name. Let's say a gas plant A, owned by ExxonMobil, operating in Sierra Leone. Let's imagine that. I have some GPS coordinates, and the GIS program, Geoinformation System, is going to allow me to view this data. Remote sensing, this goes a step beyond. It's using satellite imagery to derive some kind of information. It can be various types of information. I'm going to give you an example right after. It's a detection tool. It can be used for detecting fires, making assumptions about cloud coverage on a specific day, etc., etc. Remote sensing in GIS is being widely used and taught in many universities across the world, including in Africa. We have a lot of members from EIF that are GIS experts that help us with our investigations. But in the journalism sphere, it's not so common, actually, to have a GIS partner, a remote sensing partner. And I'm going to show you, and by the way, I'm really not an expert on these two things. I can manage using some of these tools and finding reporting ideas, but I'm not the expert here on these tools. And if I can do it by just watching a few YouTube tutorials, I'm happy to say any of you can do it, no matter where you're from. And that's where we stand equal for change in front of data, because we can all use these tools. Here's one that we made called Mine Alert Africa. You can access the slides later. There's a tutorial on YouTube in English and in French. And basically, this project was about gathering information data, geoinformation data about mines, operating mines in Africa. It started from some training that we were giving in West Africa. And some West African colleagues were telling us, well, thanks, Alex, for teaching us about geodata, but there's no mining data for us to investigate the mining sector in Africa. And me, when someone tells me something doesn't exist, I really want to check really hard. So I'm not so good at using academic methods to find data, but I'm good at advanced research. And I could see that for 18 African countries, this data was actually available in West Africa, North Africa, East Africa, South Africa, in 18 countries. And that it was simply that these governments were not linking on their website to this cadastre. It's called a cadastre whenever you have access to the full range of mining license and type of commodities that are being mined, etc., etc. But what we found out is that the World Bank had actually provided funding to African governments to make this platform exist. And so the service provider had this cadastre on their website. It's a US service provider, but not the African governments, because they want to keep this more opaque and hard to access. So we simply had to find who were the service providers. We worked with some colleagues to get the data and make it available to everyone, primarily African journalists, of course, but you can see that having all this data accessible on MineAlert Africa can be useful for any journalist that would be investigating like Western companies and their mining operations, or Chinese companies and their mining operations. It's an example of a tool. It's more of a prototype now because we need to update it. The data is accurate as of 2023. And we're still looking for funding to keep it alive. But it's, we're sorry for the wordplay, but it's a gold mine for leads and stories and investigations. And what the tool basically does is that we scraped all this data and we represent it by cross-referencing it with protected areas data. So we're able to say with this tool exactly how much mining companies are overlapping with protected areas, what kind of protected areas, in which countries, and who are the owners of these mines and these mining operations. It's something that we are still developing. The basic concept is there and ready to use. There's a tutorial. I don't want to speak too much about this because I want to give an example about remote sensing just after. But you can reach out to me if you want to know how to use the tool better, if you want to access the raw data, anything. Now I want to talk about burning skies because it's using remote sensing. So remember I told you just before, we're just using shapes, basically, shapes of mining licenses. Here it goes a bit beyond because we're using satellite imagery that can translate specific signals into specific information. Again, I'm not the one who made this. I'm the one who used a tool that was developed by the Columbia University, a tool called SkyTruth, that I will talk about in a sec. But Burning Skies was and is still ongoing. It's an investigative project we are doing about gas flaring. It's a large-scale investigation about Western oil and gas majors, but also national operators in African countries, mainly in sub-Saharan Africa and the MENA region. We collaborated with 14 media partners, over 30 journalists, and we were able, using the tool of SkyTruth, to get flaring data and emissions from 2012 to 2022 and attribute these emissions to specific operators. That way we're able to say that in country A, ExxonMobil has flared the CO2 equivalent of 4 million tons of CO2, and which is really close to village B, for example. And we've done that across 18 countries, this analysis. And that allowed us to uncover the fact that most of these emissions were hidden, and these emissions that are known to have disastrous consequences on health were underreported by Western companies and hidden. And you could see in the data it was information about Total Energy, its Italian equivalent, Eni, BP, among many others. Do we all know what's gas flaring here or not? Raise your hand. No? So are you familiar with this type of view when you think about an oil and gas platform and you see these pipes with flames coming out of it? So that's what flaring is about. My video isn't available, but basically Total Energy has a really funny video of a blue dragoon. It's kind of a cartoon they made to explain that flaring is okay and that they know how to deal with it and that it's not so dangerous if it's done properly. And the dragoon is called Charlie the Blue Dragoon. Unfortunately, the video is not available right now, but that's Total's perspective on what is flaring and why it can be managed. That's cute and positive, but there are important information missing. What flaring really is, these flames coming out of pipes, are whenever there's a surplus of gas in oil and gas facilities. It can happen during extraction, during transportation, or during refining of oil and gas. And this surplus is being burnt, which is a surplus of methane that is going to be turned into CO2, basically. And it generates more than a lot of greenhouse gas. The idea for them is to not directly deliver methane, and that's why they burn it, because methane is 40 times more potent than CO2. But what they don't tell you is that flaring has an efficiency rate that can be highly variable. So part of this methane is not getting burnt, and the part that is getting burned is getting turned into CO2, accounting for really large amounts of greenhouse gases that in Africa and the MENA region means basically people living next to a pipe, waking up every morning with a burning pipe only a few kilometers away from them. The latest US studies on the negative effect of gas flaring on human health, it starts at a range of 90 miles. If you're within a range of 90 miles, which is pretty huge, a huge area from a gas flaring source, it's going to start having effects on your respiratory system, potential heart disease, premature death, and so on and so on. So it's really disastrous effects. I don't know how much time I've got left, so sorry about that.
You're good.
I'm good, okay. It produces also a form of carbon called black carbon that is considered to be 1,500 times stronger than CO2. And it is believed to be responsible for 40% of total black carbon currently stored in the Arctic, which means that inevitably when the Arctic is going to keep on melting, this flaring gas that had been caught by the Arctic is going to be released on the long run. In the video from Total, you can see it happening like in a really undisclosed location on the sea far, far away. As I explained, that's really not what happened, and that's what our colleagues from Daraj that were handling the reporting part in the MENA region, because why would we be going there when they know the region better? They are based in Lebanon, and they have local antennas based in Algeria, Tunisia, Iraq, etc. So we had this really talented group of journalists. By the way, kudos to Ala Nasreddin, who's the head of investigations at Daraj, this pan-Arabic media that really helped us for this reporting. That was a really great partner. I wish she could have been here with us today to talk about this, but she couldn't make it to this event. What they saw on the ground by doing this reporting was that no, it does not happen in a really remote location away from any human population. And actually, from a few of the evaluation that we've made, because we could cross-reference these flaring signals and their locations and create some demographic cluster around them, is that millions are exposed directly to this 90 miles radius, starting from which you start to get these health issues. And that's only talking about Nigeria. So imagine how it is for the whole 18 countries we're talking about, and then imagine how it is on a global scale. It's really huge. And we found out that Total Energy and many others. That's a slider from Total, according to them, that's how less they've been flaring. And by 2030, flaring should be totally gone. But flaring, really? No, they call it routine flaring. It's really important in their corporate speech. So they make a distinction between flaring, because in fact it has to happen for emergency reason, and what they call routine flaring, which is flaring regularly. From the information we have, the flaring frequency they have shows that most of the flaring they do is actually routine flaring, and they underreport it as emergency flaring. So diving into the findings, we understood that a huge chunk of this flaring was had to do with corporations that were based in Western Europe and North America for the most part, while the rest of it, the second largest corporate group in terms of origin, were domestic groups in the MENA regions that are flaring. In these 18 countries in Africa and in the MENA region, the corporation that is flaring the most is Sonatrach, owned by the Algerian government. And if you take it into a larger perspective in terms of corporate groups, it's going to be Western European actors and North American corporate actors. This is just, so as you can see, Sonatrach, the Algerian one, is first. BP ranks second, Eni, ExxonMobil, Total Energy, Perenco that we talked about yesterday, and so on and so on. We also found out that there are legislations in African countries and MENA countries against flaring activities, which was surprising to all of us working on this project. It was surprising for Western journalists. It was surprising for African colleagues working in the MENA region, is that there are some laws that are prohibiting flarings and that are absolutely not respected in most of these countries, which are the Republic of Congo, Angola, Cameroon, Gabon, Nigeria, Ghana, Equatorial Guinea, Mozambique, Algeria, and so on. Now that I showed you the results, if I may finish just by showing you the tool and how hopeful we can be about satellite imagery, helping us doing our reporting and working collaboratively the way we've done for this project. So that's Mine Alert and SkyTruth flaring map. So SkyTruth is this environmental watchdog based in the US, and they use flaring data that is coming from the Colorado Mine University. They have two kinds of maps, one for live gas flaring monitoring for the past months or so, and this one accounts for a decade of flaring. You may not really see it correctly there, but you can. Thank you. But basically the map allows you to zoom in, create a square, and get an automated report about gas flaring on a specific location. It can be a really precise, specific point that you're looking at. It can be a single facility, or you can do it on the scale of your country. You can do it for Ghana, Gambia, Equatorial Guinea, France, any country really. And then it's up to you to dive more precisely into each dot and its origin and attribute it to a facility or a company, etc. I don't want to go beyond in terms of my speaking time, but I hope it's bringing you a bit of motivation and positiveness on the fact that there are some ready-to-use tools, and I believe there are going to be more and more in the future. Let me just end on this. Up. That's the crazy data set that we had at the end. The visual fact-checking we had to do, but I'm going to spare you that. What I found really interesting, just to conclude on this, is that these big organizations like Global Witness, Human Rights Watch, they already have in-house remote sensing capacity. And I think that's super interesting because it means they are really ahead on the curve, I guess, above the curve. I don't know what you say in English, but on this practice. In journalism, we have data journalism. We have the rise and not fall of data journalism, but this was really the trend. And I'm positive that the next trends, especially with climate stories and environmental stories becoming more and more important, that the next wave, the next innovation in journalism is going to integrate GIS and remote sensing more and more widely. At EIF, we have this capacity to help you with finding data, giving you advice, giving you contacts with remote sensing experts that are based in the US, in the EU, but also in Africa. There are plenty of graduates that are just waiting to find some work in this domain, and we can put you in touch with them. You can visit the website here, contact me there, names, surname at eiforum.org. And thanks a lot.
Thank you, Alex. That was very informative. So next we'll have Zubaida Ismail. Ms. Ismail is Ghana's correspondent for Reporters Without Borders, freelance environmental journalist and environmental communication specialist, as well as an entrepreneur. She has 5 years experience in press freedom advocacy, 13 years of journalism, media training, and strategic communications.
Thank you. So, picking from where Alex just left, I would want to just jump into talking about the importance of new media, AI, for us as journalists and communicators. And just from his presentation, I believe he's convinced you that it is very imperative that we use these technologies. Of course, we cannot run away from the fact that these technologies have their dangers and challenges. But like we say in my country, in one of our languages, that "onto akwadane nkene eninsu," literally meaning that you don't throw the baby with the dirty water away. Simply because there are challenges doesn't mean we will not use them. We always want to weigh them and see if the benefits outweigh the challenges. Then certainly it's okay to use it. So as a journalist, how have I been using new media and an AI? Certainly, it helps me with digital publishing. All right, we used to all watch TV. News on the TV, the traditional TV. And even when it comes to the screen, it's also evolved. It used to be one big square something with a hunchback. At least that's what I grew up seeing in Africa. And then now we have flat screens, and then we have televisions that come with internet built in. And so you can stream live on YouTube and all that. It tells you about how evolving we have become. And so certainly, it's also helping us carry the news. And on our mobile phones, the last time I checked, we have over 1 million people using a mobile phone. So imagine as a journalist, if you have your news, which is on a website, on YouTube, now we've got TikTok and all that, how many people you are reaching in a minute when you have that story. So it is no longer doing the story because you want to put it on TV, because people don't even have the time to sit behind the TV again. That tells you how it's become important, and even how it's boosting our work. So it's efficiency, it helps speed in terms of your reach and all that. So we've got all that happening. And then the platforms we're using, like I said, we've got the social media, we've got the Facebook, the YouTube and all that. And now what I'm even seeing in Africa now is that even movie producers, especially in Nigeria, are heavily putting their movies on YouTube. It's no longer even on Netflix. They are all migrating to YouTube, because it's not just about access, it's also about how much they are even making compared to putting it on Netflix. So you see most of these are Nigerian brothers rather doing their movie, heavy production, well produced, well told stories, invested in characters and production and all that, but then they end up on YouTube. And when they upload them within 24 hours, they hit 1 million views and all that. This all comes into money, puts money in their pocket. So that is how key AI and new media is to us as a journalist. When TikTok launched, I was hesitant to use it. And I believe anybody who is an investigative journalist here would share I think I downloaded TikTok just about a month ago. I was like, I wasn't going to do anything that has to do with China and all that because of the security stuff. So I wasn't going to download TikTok. But then I sat back and I was like, do you know how many people you are not reaching with your content because you say you don't want to go on TikTok? So I finally had to download TikTok. So that is how it is when it comes to your reach and all that. And then, of course, I've spoken about the importance. So it enhances efficiency, productivity, the quality of news. We use AI tools to combat fake news. Okay. Because you've got Google search, reverse search image, which is an AI tool online. You've got other tools like did I just forget my fact-checking tools? So we've got so many fact-checking tools which are seated online on Google, which you can use to check and debunk images and reports. And then also, with what Alex just shared, I just added that to my pointers because I realized that if you are using satellite imaging as a journalist, what it means is that you might not necessarily have to even go out on the field. So for stories that are very sensitive, so for Ghana, we've got most of our, not most because we don't really have much, but there is this guy who does a lot of stories on illegal mining. He goes there, puts the camera on the illegality and puts in, of course, because of that, he's receiving threats. The last time I checked on him about just 4 days ago, I was just doing my random checks on some of the journalists that I know are on red list when it comes to security. And then he told me that for about 2 months, he's not gone out to the field. What he's doing is that he's depending on people that live in the community to get his story. So somebody like this, if he has this mining alert platform, he wouldn't have to even depend because the people he's depending on are human beings. They can also be compromised to expose him. So for your own security, even when you're using such online data, what it means is that you prevent, there is that buffer between you and then the antagonist. So your security is also secured when you are using. So it even goes beyond productivity. It's also about your protection. But of course, like I said, there are challenges to everything. So in as much as we are using AI to combat fake news, AI is also helping in growing the fake news trend. It used to, as fact checkers, we used to just check on fact check images, comments made by people. But then we woke up one day and we saw something they termed deep fake. And so we had to go back into training to learn what deep fake was and how to combat deep fake. And what is deep fake? Deep fake is simply using, as I am standing and talking, someone can record me, go and sit down, use an AI tool, and then put different words in my mouth and make it look as if I really said what the person is claiming I said. And that's how bad it's become. So that is one of the most dangerous aspects of AI. But of course, we had to also now learn how to combat that. So we've been equipped with skills on how to identify deepfakes. So literally, what I'm saying is that when the danger is coming, as a journalist, you have to be proactive. You don't have to be reactive, because if you are reactive, then you always be taken unaware. However, the thing is also that for where I come from in Africa, I believe even here in the US, people are also struggling. The thing is that because people didn't think that AI will be this strong, we've not taken some trainings and all that. So we are now trying to equip ourselves with those skills and all that. So we will always have to go back to the drawing board and then keep learning. And that is the challenge. It means you don't ever stop learning. You have to always Well, maybe sometimes I'll get tired of learning. But that is what I'm saying. And then, of course, the lack of knowledge. Sometimes simple fact-checking tools we don't know, because we used to think that there was no point doing fact-checking until this fake news thing started, and then people felt that, look, we have to invest in fact-checking. So sometimes the technology, someone might be using a very big, I don't know about students in universities in US, but in Ghana, this is an Samsung Galaxy S24 Ultra. If you come to universities in Ghana, or in fact, let me take my son. My son is 22. He's in a uni in Ghana. He's using an Apple 15 Pro. And what is he doing with it? Just phone calls. Right. So these are the kind of big phones these young guys are using. But that is a whole wealth in their hand, and that is a whole powerful tool in their hands. Currently, I use my phone to do video. I use my phone to do editing. I don't use my laptop to do anything. I only use my laptop when I've got to respond to emails from my boss sitting right there. Right. But this is how powerful these tools are in our hands. But the youngsters do not even know that beyond the selfies and the hellos and the watching of YouTube, they are not aware of what they can actually do with these devices in their hands. But of course, it also puts them at risk, because it's fancy. It's sometimes things for you and all that. And so if you're not careful, before you think about something, I want to buy this because there are cookies working. Have you wondered why you wake up one day, you go like, I want to go and get a pair of sneakers? You just think about it. And then the next minute you're online and then you are seeing sneakers popping up in your ad because they pick your intelligence. And that is what we talk about artificial intelligence. They do. So they know, they're tracking you. They know what you want to do. And that's why the next minute, even though you haven't gone to even search, but the next minute you are seeing them, it's because they have cookies. And they are the dangers. It exposes us to a lot of things. And sometimes what I say is that don't just click on accept when you see every cookie. I take my time and I go through the options and I make sure I turn every button off before I come to say accept my preference. But sometimes we are so quick, we just click. And so they have a trail of your whole life online, which is one of the dangers. And so I believe I want to stop here.
Thank you for that. So our next presenter is Sharif Bojang. Sharif is the deputy political editor at the Africa Report based in Paris, guiding a continent-spanning network of reporters, curating and sharpening coverage on security, diplomacy, and political fault lines. A former president of the Gambia Press Union, he spent nearly a decade reporting for the English services of Radio France Internationale, Radio Netherlands, and New African Magazine in London as a Dakar-based correspondent covering political and social developments in Senegal, the Gambia, and Guinea-Bissau. He later held senior editorial roles at West Africa Democracy Radio, serving as both senior producer and head of English service. As a stringer, his bylines have appeared in The Guardian, Al Jazeera, France 24, and Africa 24 TV. Outside the newsroom, he's a communications consultant for UN Women, crafting narratives around women's economic empowerment and electoral participation in Senegal, Liberia, Sierra Leone, and Nigeria through the Women's Situation Room, a pioneering initiative to promote peaceful elections through women-led monitoring. He was a finalist for the 2015 CNN African Journalist of the Year Award for his frontline reporting on the Ebola crisis in Sierra Leone. Earlier, he was shortlisted for the Fitzgerald Prize for Young African Journalists and named one of Africa's most promising young journalists by Reuters. In 2011, he received the Gender Award from the Radio for Peacebuilding Africa Awards for a searing radio documentary on rape in Senegal.
On the desk. Oh, okay, that's fine. Yeah. Good. Thanks for that.
Yes, yes.
So when I started journalism, that was my first big interview, my assignment from a daily newspaper in the Gambia. I was just under 18, and this was an interview with Gambia's opposition leader at the time. Elections were approaching. And this is why I'm showing this. This is a cassette recorder. You record, it ends, you turn it to the other side. I think it was facing out. So this opposition leader is much older now. I've gone gray. No one used this recorder anymore. A few years down the line, this one I'm using here, it's a digital one, not a cassette one. It was the pride of everybody at the time. We thought we got rid of the cassettes for the digital one. I guess Reverend Jesse Jackson is not as energetic now as then. I don't wear these colors anymore. I stick to gray, dark navy blue, and black. But this was then. None of this equipment is used today. And of course, media, journalism, and everything has completely changed. So across Africa and, of course, every part of the world, artificial intelligence and emerging technologies are shaping how stories are told, how stories are disseminated, verified, and even consumed, from hyperlocal journalism powered by voice tech, as Zubaida said, to AI-driven fact-checking tools. The continent's media innovators are also adapting rapidly, often under resource constraints, but with immense creativity. So the issue of this debate of what AI can do and cannot do and how it should be used has been on, and it will be on for a long time. I was telling Cherno a couple of weeks ago, I know a newsroom where the translator from French to English and English to French is a human being. Been there for so long, but because of the fact that a lot of people a lot of employers and newsrooms want to explore AI, first as a result of financial limits of financial resources, but also just speed and just the idea. Even those that are not struggling with financial issues want to explore and see whether machines can introduce human beings. And they got rid of her. She's somebody I know. But then it wouldn't take long. The replacement was AI, to use AI to translate everything. But it wouldn't take long for the sub-editors in this newsroom to notice a change. You can do a lot with AI, but there's a lot too that you cannot do with AI, because a human being with feelings, machines don't do that. And then the sub-editors were quick to raise issue with the management. We are doing much more work with the machine translation than when she was there and stuff. So I guess across newsrooms in Africa and other places too, you have those kind of situations where people are gotten rid of to be replaced by AI. So what AI can do in the newsroom? Of course, some of the speakers mentioned. So automate routine reporting, for example, the sports, elections, weather, translation of content across languages. In Africa, we've seen some of them doing the indigenous languages, local languages, speed of transcription and summarization. And it also detects misinformation. I think both Alex and Zubaida talk about that. And deep fakes, of course, which is a problem at the moment. It also analyzes and should like data sets for example, for investigative journalists. So in Africa, there are explorations and there are projects. Media organizations, newsrooms are taking advantage of the power of AI, new technologies. In Kenya, we have the Civic Signal, AI tool for verifying citizen-generated content. Nigeria, Sahara Reporters, crowdsourced tips, plus AI-assisted vetting. So you have the Pan-Africa one, the VMO, that does the voice AI delivering news in local languages. And you have a lot of them across Africa. These are just brief examples. But then where you over-rely on AI, there are concerns. And these are the dangers of AI-led newsroom consolidation, job loss, and de-skilling. Journalists could be in newsrooms where AI is so consolidated. Journalists could be sidelined to supervising the AI, reducing the craft of content curation. Then there is a bias amplification because AI reflects the biases of the training data and the humans who design it. Loss of press freedom. Sadibu will agree to this. Algorithmic newsrooms could be more vulnerable to censorship or manipulation, especially in places where you have authoritarianism, dictatorship, and repression. So in as much as the AI is good and everybody is jumping to make the best use of it, artificial intelligence should assist and not replace journalists in newsroom where it is possible, unless it is the only way out, because we've seen some newsrooms where entire news articles are written by AI, and there are ethical issues. And I guess we can discuss this here, and I would like to know your thought. Personally, I believe if any journalist or newsroom is relying entirely on AI to write your news, your readers, your followers, your news consumers need to know that this is a machine doing this. If I am reading, I thought that I'm reading from a human. If it is a machine, I need to know that I am reading this from a machine. If the machine is editing, probably that's a different thing, unless the context, a human editor, I think there is a limit what a human editor cannot do for you. A machine shouldn't do that for you. But in a nutshell, I want to be told as a reader that I am reading from a machine and not a human being. So use AI to enhance human journalism, but not to replace it. Newsrooms should invest in training human beings, not just on tools. Encourage open source, Africa First AI models, for example, and then keeping journalism people-powered and community-focused. So the new media platforms, the issue of decentralizing content creation. For example, we've seen various speakers talk about social media, your TikToks, your Snapchats, Facebook, and Fatu, of course, will know a lot about this. Social media has shifted the power dynamic. TikTok, YouTube, Substack allows individual creators to bypass traditional gatekeepers, as we know them, redefining what counts as news or commentary. Now, anyone with a smartphone or a platform like TikTok, etc., can share stories, can make commentary, or even break news. People who are not trained journalists, who've no idea about journalism, but then they know when information, news break out and how to disseminate it because they have access to smartphones or social media platforms, are competing with journalists for news, for information, who breaks it fast all across the world, Africa in particular. Influencers and citizen journalists becoming key sources during major events and crises. So many things happen and journalists are not there. anyone who is there with, we've seen, like, for example, in Sierra Leone, when a few days ago, when State House, there was fire outbreak, the presidential, the State House, the first spot where I saw that fire, it was just an ordinary person on Facebook. It's not the SLBC or any newsroom. But the same platforms use algorithms that can trap users in echo chambers or spread misinformation. And then there's a lot of ethical issue on this as well. First is, who do you trust? If anybody can disseminate information, gather, treat, and disseminate information between journalists and non-journalists, the issue of trust is there. The issue of misinformation is there, because speed is very important. Everybody wants to be the first person to break news. So the editorial and ethical concerns surrounding this, for example, AI only as objective as the data, like I said, it's trained. And unfortunately, that often means it mirrors the biases we already have. AI tools can inherit and spread bias if not carefully designed and monitored. And loss of editorial gatekeeping. Information moves fast, but not always accurate. And we've seen that regularly, almost on a daily basis. And then a growing tension between speed and accuracy. Data privacy issues, Alex. Personalized content often means users are being tracked in the ways that they don't truly understand. So you are there, like you talking about with the cookies. You don't even know what's happening just because it's online and you have access. And you don't even know your personal details, because now everything, I would rather you go to my house now and rob it than take my phone, because my entire life is on my phone. What you cannot find on my phone is not anywhere else. So I would rather you go take anything else but my bag and my phone, my gadgets. So, but then who's got access to them, to the data that I have in my phone? So that's it for now. I hope we can discuss further.
So thank you to all of the panelists. This is an amazing conversation. AI is also being used in the academy, in the classroom. There are professors at the college where I teach who are using AI to build their syllabi and online course content. So it's really interesting how this conversation could overlap. So we'll take questions from the audience. Yeah.
This is an interesting conversation. I have just two questions. One for Alex. I wanted for you to say more about the geo mapping tool. How far can it go back in terms of mining data? The reason I ask is because of the much of the information now on surveys, can it be dated back to the earlier period, going back to 20s, if you can trace it progressively in terms of the mapping of minerals and mining companies and all of that. The second thing is, how can you use this sensing technology to track maritime data, like shipping, shipping data and all that. And the other question would be for Sheriff, if you can also explain more the limits of translation when you use new media technology, AI, the difference that it provides from a human translator that can get precise words, and how, depending on AI, the limits that can attach in terms of particular words or context.
So yeah, maybe I can answer on the geodata. So the second question, there's a tool called Marine Traffic that you can use, Global Fishing Watch, Marine Traffic, and that can get you this kind of data for vessels. And also SkyTruth has an interesting tool called Slick Detection, I believe. So it's about like dirty oil dumping. So they harmonize data from marine traffic with data from oil spills that they monitor. So it's a pretty cool tool that, again, anyone can use for free to detect polluting ships. And then for the mining data, so there are two sets of data really. So you have on a national level, any country will usually have licenses listed with the name of the operator, the shareholders, the validity dates for the mine. It applies to oil and gas licenses too. And for the tool that we have, Mine Alert Africa, it's like a snapshot of 2023. In some case, you can have like legacy mining licenses that have been there for 40, 50 years, and they are still there, so they are still in the data. But for older ones, you could look into old records from a national government. The tool wouldn't work for that. Or you could try to do some advanced search on Google, by keywords, like telling Google with the brackets, like, just give me this keyword, give me this license name, that date, and it's probably been archived, especially for old information about extractivism. Usually it's open books and it's been scanned, so you can access that.
So the biggest problem in terms of a difference between human translation and AI largely is emotion. Machines don't have emotion. And I was telling Chelna a couple of weeks ago, the same person who was laid off by people was telling me a story. There was a voice translation, I think from French to English. But then when the article came out, her newspaper media, when they put the article out, the article says cat. It's a French word that's it's supposed to be insect that eats trees and stuff and plants. But then I think because of the voice translation, maybe it was unclear and stuff, but then it was translated as a cat. And the article went out, and then and it stayed out for some time until somebody noticed that tell them, no, it's not cat. This is supposed to be this insect that, and then when you do, for example, oftentimes so most of the time, what is said is not the issue, because then that can translate, especially if it is text, everything. But then when for example, at the Africa Report, when we take from French Jeune Afrique to translate to English for Africa Report, the English version, the way the French journalists write and the way we write are completely different. I always say that. I don't know sometimes I joke. I will tell my boss when we have a meeting and then this is translated. I say, how did they get away with this? Not because it's wrong, but they have their own way of life. But then if you translate directly to your English audience, it becomes so boring, completely dead, because what is said is already there. That's all there. But sometimes the ingredient, any storyteller, I see myself more as a storyteller than a journalist. Any storyteller will tell you, whether it's radio or text, the ingredient of especially a feature, any story, are things that are not said. When people are reading, if you're watching TV, you don't need to do anything. It's the easiest thing, because you're hearing, you're seeing. Radio, you're hearing, you're not seeing. And that's why radio presenters do a lot of description, so that the listener could feel that he's seeing. But if you are writing, no one is seeing, no one is hearing. So you're going to have to put a lot of those in your what the person is saying, and everything that is said goes with an emotion. But then you don't interview, let's say, a rebel leader, the M23 leader who is struggling, who is under a lot of pressure, from the rival fighters and so on. You put that smiling or something and give the impression in your report that like is at ease or something. So these ones are always missing, and you always notice that with a human being, you can put those contexts. Maybe the original draft in any other language that is translated from lack those things. But then if you translate it, because I think the French audience, for example, I'm not sure of other languages, but the audience that read French articles and English ones are different. So what works for you, what excites you in French is not going to excite you in English. But then with human being, you can put all those emotions and context. But with machine, it gives you what you ask. Nothing else, nothing more, nothing less. I mean, it could be less, but nothing more than that. So that's the biggest difference.
Let me add to this and give you a typical example of myself. So I use Ota. Ota is a platform where you just put in a voice recorded and then it transcribes for you. And when I started using Ota, I was like, sometimes the interviews are so long, it's tiring listening and typing. So let me try Ota, subscribe. It's a platform you've got to pay and all that. So I did that. Then when I put the voice, it does the transcription. Then I play. I'm listening to what I put in and then what it's giving me. And guess what? I went back to my old way of listening and typing, because the truth is that sometimes, even if it is English, it is even a French thing, but even in English, when the voice is English and you've given it to Ota to translate, sometimes the words, what it gives you, is really not what the person has said. Like it gives you what it hears. Okay, and so maybe what the person said is not really what that AI tool in there is hearing. So it gives you what it thinks it should give you. And so definitely there is always going to be that human aspect, especially in terms of journalism and communication. There's no way I see AI making journalists redundant. It can't work, because you definitely will have to still have the human phase when it comes to storytelling and then writing and editing. And my example is the user. So I've stopped using Ota actually.
I also have an example, if I may.
Yeah.
So we do a lot of training and mentoring programs at EIF in all parts of the world. So typically I come and it's like longer session when I show this kind of tools, but I explain how to do it and more precisely. And I was showing a tool, which is a new one called Global Methane Sat, I think it's called. Mm-hmm. And so that one is for raw methane emissions, like pure gas, And so I was showing it how to use it to some colleagues, and I was telling to that participant, where are you from? Well, oh, you're from there. Well, look, just near the city where you were born, there's a huge gas leak going on right now. That was detected. Maybe it could be a subject for a story. So the person is like, yeah, cool, great. Let's talk about this soon. And in these programs, they get small grants to do their stories. Not that we attribute, but the donor does it, And so the person comes back to me a couple of days later and is like, yeah, I'm done. I found out what happened with this gas leak and everything. I'm like, great. So what happened? And the person tells me, okay, let me send you the whole article. Like, wow, 24 hours later, you've written the whole article. And for me, that was not possible. Like, no matter how good you are, like, there's no way. And I read the article and it was perfectly written. Perfectly written. And it just because I'm a geek and I'm a nerd about CO2 and methane because of these crazy investigations, that I knew that the article was totally wrong. And there's this tool called Zero GPT, but it's not 100% reliable. It's only reliable when it tells you 100% written by ChatGPT. Then you can really believe it. When it's like 80%, because I've ran it on some of my own articles and it was saying 80-70% written by ChatGPT. But in that case, I checked it. It was 100% written by ChatGPT. So I went back to the person and I was like, what the fuck? Like, you're supposed to check it. And and it's a lack of respect for yourself, for your audience, for me. Like, and the person was like 21, and telling me, well, this is what we do at our newsroom. Like, but And so, yeah, it's a really pessimistic anecdote. I'm sorry about this. And then it's kind of funny because 2 days later, they sent me the same article again, 100% written by ChatGPT, despite the discussion. So it's kind of funny, but at the end of the day, I'm like, we're all I think we're all over 30 years old here, right? But for the next generation, they're going to be born into this, like this Bukowski poem, born into this. And I'm a bit pessimistic about this, And sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say, I teach research paper writing. I see it with my students all the time, and they don't even really understand the danger of the lack of integrity of what did I do wrong? Yeah.
Yes. I was sitting somewhere in a kind of recruitment panel to review some tests was around on the DRC Northern Eastern situation, and I was not aware of all that. But one of our friends just said, "Okay, we have to check if this test came from." ChatGPT, and when we verified, he realized that it really was a ChatGPT test. This is something which will be more and more facing, and in the area, in the era of quick precipitation and everything. We have seen effectively a lot of journalists trying to use that in their reporting, but there are a lot of threats, a lot of discrepancies. If you realize, but why I would like to, after thanking you also for the great presentations. Yes, recently, I think it was 1.5 years. Some press freedom advocates and organization they gathered in Paris. RSF was one of them, and I think CPG also was there. And they have put out what we call the Paris Charter on AI and journalism with some recommendations, nearly 8, highlighting, for example, the importance of journalists themselves to be to have the own responsibility of the content they produce, not really ChatGPT, not really AI, but the charter, which is available on the internet and websites. They did not really reject that, but needs to be used with a lot of wisdom, yes, and strategy, and then also on rely a lot what Sharif said about the human dimensions. Also, it should really take into consideration the human dimensions, and also the importance of in the AI governance global systems. Journalists and all the journalism and press freedom advocates should be, have a kind of representation in order, yes, to make their voice heard and their interests also taken into consideration. But in all these things, to me, the priority should be we should give the priority to the human. The human dimensions, and then we realize there is all these artificial things on which might be shared with wider public, but it needs to be something which is in accordance, comes from a human brain, and so and so. And the final thing I would like to also, in relation to the subject of the panel, is how AI also has been used against journalists themselves in terms of safety and security. This is something we have seen a lot of examples in Africa. Journalists who was caught and trapped. Yesterday, I think I was explaining the case of these journalists in the DRC, and the voice has been used as if he was the one who was announcing. The retractation of the M23 leader. These are something we are seeing emerging as a threats. And where it is interesting for press freedoms and just the wider media fraternity also to be really, really aware and to get prepared is the hiccups which are there and the threats which might be, used against journalists themselves, which might also be used against journalist organizations. Also, we have seen the trends recently of some or 3 or 4 outlets, online media outlets, which are really, well seen with a lot of people, a lot of frequentation, and many people, millions and millions. And those they have in a time of difference of less than a month, there is a kind of instantaneous attacks. Those media outlets have been down. And it was less probably related to AI, but it is the security issues. I mean, these are the challenges as we go that will be used against journalists themselves also. And those who are using that mostly are those authoritarian regimes also. They are putting, the more the technology will be developing, the more they will be also trying to develop their own technology or use that technology against journalists. And this is also will be used for propaganda issues, as we have seen in some countries in Africa, with namely the Russian propaganda, either in Central African Republic or in some Sahelian countries. And now I have seen, this has started taking place in other countries like Equatorial Guinea, how they are trying to emerge and come here and start some trainings. But what is behind is how to manipulate and how to develop a kind of counter narratives in these things. So in a conclusion, I think AI is something which is good, which might be used with all the necessary wisdom, because also we are in terms of fact checking, in terms of investigations, but the truths and the reliable information need to be there. And this is the keywords. Thank you.
Do we have any more questions?
Or sort of thought. In thinking about the geomapping, and you probably know this because now I thought I caught you yesterday and then you knew stuff. So
Let's go back. Okay.
No, with the geomapping, it's also really interesting to bring down other layers of data. So like with your gas flares, it would be fascinating to know if those are closer, or what the association and proximity is to low-income neighborhoods and communities as opposed to higher income ones, because you can probably bet that more flares and more pollution are associated with low income and socioeconomic differences, which brings up a new story, really.
Exactly. So you could do this on a country scale. You could do this on a regional scale. If you compare it, so my idea with this project was to do global stories with this global data set. It's a crazy amount of money, and so we don't have any operational funding. Like EIF is really a bug in the matrix of this nonprofit scene. I don't know how I am here talking to you, but we made it from small grants to small grants. So that whole investigation with 14 media partners, 18 countries covered. We did that with 20,000 euros, which really is not a lot. Our idea was to double this. I wanted to make a global stories with our partners, covering all regions of the world. And we would have, I think we could have done that with double the amount of this budget. But the data is out there. So even if we didn't do it this way, I'm here to explain how to do it. Our colleagues are here at other conferences giving the keys of the house of this project. Anyone can get in, reports. It's open bar. Really. So, yeah, anyone can help themselves. And yeah, it's a really good point. And there are so many things you could do. Water resources, low incomes, hospitals, schools.
And we've done a student of mine has done a really good study of soil lead content in neighborhoods in Louisville, Kentucky. And it's, as you expect, very high lead content in very low income areas. And then the gradation goes inversely from there.
And the funny thing also is that the EU is like having these pledges to curb methane emissions and flaring. Well, they just export the practice to Africa. I mean, that's what's going on. So you see the EU emissions are getting down, and the MENA and the Africa ones are going up, thanks to the Western operators. Yeah.
So I have a couple of comments and a couple questions. So the comments are, so for first and only time I ever used ChatGPT, I was on a summer vacation, not last summer, but the summer before, and my girlfriend's sister was like, oh, it's amazing. You'd be surprised what it can do. And so he had his tablet or something like that. He opened it up, and I asked, I said, my request or command or whatever you want to call it was something along the lines of, write me a part for my syllabus to explain to students why they shouldn't use ChatGPT.
Okay.
And I pressed the button, and like literally, like, I don't know, 30 seconds later, there was like this five bullet point, each with a sort of half paragraph, totally compelling, totally amazing explanation of why you shouldn't use ChatGPT in your college class, right? And I was like, whoa, right?
This is ChatGPT telling you not to use it.
Yeah. So that was what I asked it to do, right? And it did it like I mean, I would have been hard pressed in an hour or an hour and a half to come up with something that was any better, as good as that.
The first time I tried it, I said, write a love letter to my husband. It was surprisingly specific and really good, like better than I would have thought of.
So it can be scary good in a way, in what it can produce, right? So the second part of the comment is I've been part of this working group of a bunch of anthropologists, mostly current and former heads of departments, organized by the Wenner-Gren Foundation for Anthropological Research. And we've been just kind of thinking about what is anthropology now? How do we teach it in this time and place and so on? And one of the themes for the project, which is the one I signed up to be part of, is called Generations. And so I've been thinking a lot about generation in both its meanings, generation as historical change, but generation also as like the life course. And I've been thinking about that in part because I'm getting old, right? I mean, I think I'm the oldest person in the room, pretty sure of that. And I'm, kind of getting near the end of my career. And I find myself constantly looking at the discipline and the things that our graduate students bring to the table when they arrive and so on. And then asking myself, and being critical of it sometimes, and then asking myself, which generation is it that's like giving me my perspective? Is it the historical change? Like, is it really the historical change that's bothering me? Or am I just getting an old person and to sort of stereotype old people think that, society has gone to hell in a handbasket, and that's been going on for forever in a sense, right? I mean, I can think of my grandparents or my grandfathers grumbling about what's happening in the world or something. So, and I think that's a real thing. And so it makes me wonder, like, our take on AI, how much of it in 100 years, they'll look back on our concerns and say, can you believe that they sat in a room at Brown University and a big conference on the media and democracy and debated whether artificial intelligence should be used, right? Or how it should be used. I mean, isn't there some risk that we're kind of, it's our life course generation that's leading us to think of these things as problems, and we have no idea what the history is going to produce in 100 years. So that's kind of a comment and a question. And then a more specific question from Sharif's presentation. You had one of your blurbs in one of your slides was an Africa First AI model. And I was curious what you meant by that. What would an Africa First AI model be? And then a side question for Alex. Mm-hmm. I mean, with the flaring, couldn't they capture that as gas to sell or something like that? I mean, why does it all have to be kind of spewed into the environment?
Yeah, so in the context of especially outreach languages, I had more, but then because of the time limits, for example, I think in Ghana, in Nigeria, you have, I mean, of course, it's just generally AI, but then I am thinking around whether there can be just models that are just specific to the needs of Africa, for example, especially when it comes to the issue of the local dynamics. If you are in the remotest part of northern Nigeria, in Maiduguri or in Kano or somewhere, how do you come up with a model that will not just translation from English to Yoruba or from English to whatever language, Igbo or something, but then how do you get people who have not been to school, who have never, but then of course with mentorship, with just guidance, they can sit up there. Let's say Nigeria used to have this story BBC from the market. BBC, I don't know why they stop it. BBC used to do that story. How do you get them to people to sit and then use AI? For them, that context, I guess it will be okay. But of course, bearing in mind any ethical issue. But then how do you use it for people, for their needs, either for livelihood or for whatever entertainment and things like that? Because my mind was on, let's say, the drone technology. We've seen now, especially in Senegal. Of course, it's still the same technology, but when people sit in Senegalese schools now, especially Gaston Berger University in St. Louis, where students are coming up with drones, and then when they do the drone, it's for specific needs of those rural areas and stuff. Of course, maybe the same technology, but then the function of the drone is for the specific needs of those rural areas, the farming community and stuff. And of course, those drones probably might not be super useful in here or developed countries, but those places it is. So I'm looking forward to tech bros in Africa, especially at very common rural areas, that will come up with models that can be accessible. Because now, as we know it, unless you have access to everything, there is even people who've been to school and stuff, educated and stuff, you need to be AI models, you need to be told how to use it and then things like that. But I'm looking at whether at grassroots level, anybody can come up with, but that is not pretty much, that is not even in English or in anything, but not just language translation and then doing, but then can it be used to ease up people's life? Can it be used to improve the lives and livelihood of people who might not have the opportunity, the models that we have at the moment?
Thank you. And yes, for flaring, the annual amount of energy loss that is constituted by gas flaring, it could power up the whole African continent. So that's how much is being lost by gas flaring, first thing. Second thing, there is technology to end gas flaring. I'm not saying CO2 emissions that are from drilling. I'm really talking about flaring. There are technologies available to do this, but they are expensive. How much? So the World Banks estimate that between $100 and $200 billion would be needed to end flaring and to end raw methane emissions. That sounds like a lot, right? $200 billion. But do you know how much the oil and gas sector worldwide has in terms of net revenues? 4 trillion. So they could totally afford it. With policy making to push them to do that, let's be naive once more. That could happen. Yeah.
That's a 10% of Elon Musk.
Also, yeah. And also there's another technology that is being pushed forward by the oil and gas sector. It's called carbon capture and storage. And if you're not familiar with this US media and newsletter called Drilled, you should look it up because it explains how it's a whole greenwashing technique that is totally useless and does not capture CO2 at all.
We have about 10 more minutes if anybody has any final questions or comments, or the panelists have any final comments?
There's something I want to think about. My thought is triggered by what Sharif just said about using AI somehow for good in rural areas. So my colleagues in Nigeria developed this thing called Text for Life that because we know that over 80% of women, even in villages, have some kind of access to a smartphone, whether it's through their family or whatever. So we put this app on their phones, and if they are in need when they're pregnant or in childbirth or after delivery and there's an emergency, there's a way that they can pull up this app, and they've got several options, but they can text the primary health center, which then disperses a contracted local taxi out to get the woman and bring her into primary health care or the hospital. So we're thinking of upgrading that as a way to collect data on birth and death to acquire vital statistics. I'm thinking now that if we think long and hard about it, there might be some way to adapt AI into that app, which is a very basic app, to either answer questions or come up with solutions for basic problems and questions during pregnancy that lead to high-risk pregnancies and thus deaths. There must be some way we can think about that.
Yeah, actually, that reminds me. I think a similar thing was developed in Senegal. There is a village called Khombol. I did a story for Radio Nederland some years ago. I think it was an initiative by some tech guy with the support of Plan International. So this particular village, I mean, it's very unique. I've never seen anywhere like this village. So there is hardly any man there. All the men, the husbands are in Dakar hustling. They go back like during the no, not even weekends, like the Eid, the feast. Mm-hmm. So some they will go twice a year, but each time they go, they leave. The wives are pregnant. Everybody is pregnant. I mean, so it's a lot of pregnancy in the village. But then what happened is that people don't go to hospital, I mean, during pregnancy and all those. Then this app, the project was called, I don't know what it means. It's I think it's either Serer or very typical Wolof Wure, Were, Werle, 3 W's and stuff. I remember that's what it was called. But then this app, so everybody's phone, they have it. And then when they have doctor's appointment, they need to go for checkup and all those things. It comes in colors. So they don't have text, it's colors that they have. So when you have red, you know that, within 24 hours, the next day you need to go and stuff. So it's the colors that, and a year down the line, I'm not sure what happened to it, because this was talking about some 8 years ago, more than that. It changed a lot. They realized that less pregnancies are affected. They realized that less kids are dying, and then the health too, there's a lot of improvement. That was a year after it came. I don't know what happened after that, but then it's a lot of pregnancy in that village, and so they use colors because they've not gone to school. They can read text message. Because that was the first idea, text. But then who reads the text message for them? This is a problem. And then also part of a plan, international project. I was in some of the remotest part of Guinea-Bissau, and there is a village there where nobody's ever been to school. So even text messages, but they have relatives who are in the capital, in Bissau and other places. So they hired a teacher from a nearby village, somebody who's been to school. They built a mod school and to teach the kids, not part of the national curriculum or anything, is to teach the kids and not for them to become directors or professors or anything, no, just to be able to read and write text messages and stuff. And when they were graduating, the kids, I was invited, I flew there by Plan International, and it was so huge. And, some of the things we take for granted, I have never seen anything like that. So the excitement and the satisfaction that kids could read text message for them, could write when they all the things that they, like government, any document, the kids can, at least basic ones can say this, even though if it is not going to be right in Portuguese, but can do that. And that's the essence of building that school, hiring the teacher, and then things like that. Yeah.
So I think when it comes to building tools, AI generated tools specifically for development, we've been doing that, like you say. You just remembered a couple of them, and we've got a lot of them in Ghana, because what Ghana government is trying to do is that trying to see how we perhaps can be the lead in terms of AI in the sub-region. And there was this plan of building what we call the IT city. It's a plan on paper. A sword was cut forward about 6 years ago by the previous government. They played politics with it. It didn't happen, and then we expect this current government to do that. But as part of the things they are doing, so there is this tool on phones, and I'm not even talking about smartphones, the normal phones, because it was specifically made for livestock owners in northern part of Ghana, and it crosses into Burkina Faso and other places, owned by a company called Cow Tribe. Now, what Cow Tribe does is that they are a company that supports livestock farmers in reducing mortality among the livestock, because generally that's their wealth, that's where their livelihood comes from. But they noticed there was a high rate of mortalities, which could either be the weather, when there is no grass to feed, so many things. So they developed this app on the phone, not smartphone, ordinary phones. And what it does is that they are able to pair every livestock farmer to a veterinarian outside of their community, because the veterinarians don't live in the rural community, they live in the cities, but they are able to do that. So the farmer is able to contact a veterinarian when they wake up and they realize that maybe one of the animals is not looking good or something. They are able to get in touch with the veterinarian, and then even if the veterinarian doesn't come and inject or whatever, they're able to take them through at least some basic things they need to do to at least say like first aid for the animals before they have to step in. Yeah, so we've got such
Things,
a couple of things, and that's in the agri sector. We've got a couple of things also ongoing with
yeah. And I promise after this I'll keep quiet. Like just follow up to your question about the issue of Africa, the AI tools that just suit the needs of Africa. Again, Senegal, Sadibou, you'll remember, there is a French-based Senegalese who came up. He was even on CNN. That was a major invention. Came up with a game tailor-made to suit. It was purposely for Senegal street kids. I don't know, you might have in Senegal, the kids that are sent from the villages, Guinea-Bissau, all over to Senegal to learn Quran. But then the teachers, the Quranic teachers, send them to the streets to beg. It's linked to politics. It's linked to everything. So if you're not in Senegal, you think, why couldn't they stop it? But it's linked to everything. It's linked to the Islamic Brotherhood. And then, so it's linked to the political survival of a sitting government, and so it's complex. But because they couldn't stop it, kids are all over the street. They sleep there. Some turn into drugs. It's a lot of, they're exposed to everything. But this guy came up with a game, and the game is just for the kids. And in playing this game, it's like real life games where kids are taught how to detect vulnerabilities in case somebody want to, just to get them from the street, to steal them, kidnap them or something, and especially traffic, how they see dangers, traffic light and everything. So it's purposely for the street kids. And then we cannot stop it. So we come up with something that protects them. And this became a huge, huge hit for the kids. Everywhere in the street they play, and they made it available. But just for these street kids, where they could, everything colors the street, you will think is a real city. Then they see the dangers, they play, you know where to stop. When somebody try to harm you, you know what to do, the police and stuff. So that became a huge hit. I think the French government had some support for him. I don't know what happened to it now, but that was really very thoughtful. So I think again with ChatGPT, with AI, we can have things like that. Because if you bring that and give it to kids here, they don't have that problem. So it wouldn't be a solution for them. So with AI too, probably we can have things that, like said in Ghana, we can have more of that, these inventions. Yeah.
Well, I want to say thank you to everyone. This was an enlightening conversation.